Meet Willard. He's a kid who spent most of his life in his skivvies, thanks to me constantly revamping my equipment system. He's the son of a famous wizard who just wants to learn the ways of the flame god. That is until the day his father is killed without summoning a single flame in his defense. The same day that Willard learns he lives in a world where magic does not exist. In fact, this is not your typical fantasy world at all. Imagine a world where 80s technology became sentient before it learned about the internet. These machines aren't all that bright, but they've gained sentience. They've destroyed Willard's world, and they've killed his father. And so, Willard begins this story as a lost child, trying to find magic in a world where AI is trying to steal his soul. He'll do this in a semi-open world platformer, where he'll battle robots at each turn as he looks for others who've survived this technopocalypse. Finding others will be essential. Together, you'll build a village, defend it against hordes of sentient 80s tech, and take some of this remnant along with you as you travel the world, trying to unlock the secrets of what's happening in this strange universe. Hey there, I'm Matt, the guy wearing the pants here at Nightrun Studio. So here's the deal. After 2.5 years grinding away at my dream game, I'm hitting the reset button. This project has been a little bit like trying to battle Ganon with the flu. I love this concept, but as a total noob developer, the whole thing has been stitched together with 10-minute YouTube tutorials, duct tape, and what I can only describe as a whole lot of enthusiasm. After 2.5 years, I'm still making the same game, but I've realized the limitations of doing battle with woodwinds. My tools have improved a whole lot in this time, and so I'm rebooting this journey. Along the way, I figured it might be fun, or at least entertaining, to document what it's like to build a game from scratch, but this time, from the perspective of someone who's already made most of the rookie mistakes. So, grab some popcorn, settle in, and watch as this semi-competent creator picks up a non-musical weapon and takes another swing at greatness. Welcome to Devlog 0 of Willard. Take 2. Exploration is at the heart of this game. And while platforming is just one of the modes of play you'll use in Willard, you can't do anything else until you can move around, so let's start there. So, first thing getting started was to add a tile map to my game. I made this stony, mountainy tile map already, so I just tossed it into Unity, put it on a palette, and threw my player on top. Next I gave him some basic movement. Now, if you've done any coding at all, then you're probably familiar with a line of code something like this. You take the rigid body, which represents the physics of your player, and give it a velocity. This just means giving it a direction, whatever button you're pressing, and speed. This is pretty much the first step of any beginner tutorial. And this is still at the core of what I'm doing now, but here's where the trouble starts. Next you want to add jumping. So you take in a jump input, and now you have to add verticality to your velocity calculations. Still no big deal. But now you have to keep track of whether you're on the ground or in the air. Otherwise you could keep jumping forever when you're already in the air. But what about other states like climbing walls, grabbing ledges? Now before I can jump, I have to make sure I'm not in the air, not climbing, not hanging from a ledge, not attacking, not dashing, not dead, or in a damaged state. Before you know it, your code is a giant spaghetti monster just waiting for the first sign of an error so it can devour you. This happened to me earlier in development, so right from the beginning I set up a state machine. We've got a player script that holds references to all the different states my player can enter. And then those states each get their own script. The beauty of this is that each state handles only its own logic. So now if there's a problem with my ledge climb state, I just have to look through a handful of lines of code instead of trying to battle the spaghetti monster. So alongside running, jumping, I added ledge grab and ledge climb states. To make this work, I have 2 invisible rays that my player shoots out. Anytime the lower one detects a wall and the higher one does not, he knows he's found a ledge, and so he enters the ledge grab state. Then, if I press a key in the direction he's facing, he does another check, this time searching the space directly above the ledge. If the space is free, he plays a climbing animation. The interesting thing here is that the player himself hasn't moved. I'm just playing an animation that makes him appear on the ledge. On the last frame of the climb then, I teleport the player to the location 1 unit forward and 1 unit up from where he was hanging. It had some bugs. But eventually I got it just right. By the end of the week, I had a handle on the architecture for my player. I had my state machine set up, as well as a core component system. Now, the state handles what the player should be doing. For example, my move state is always monitoring when I press jump, stop moving, whether I'm falling, and if so, it tells the player to go to the corresponding state. but I also have core components that handle the how of the player's controls. Any state can tell the player to move, but all the logic for moving, whether it's falling, running, walking, or stopping and turning around, gets handled in one place by the movement component. A great example of this is my jump. I could jump from an idle, running, crouching, whatever state, and yet no matter what state, it all gets handled the same way. Especially cool part is that my movement pays attention to what part of the jump I'm currently at. So for example, it has a lower gravity while I'm jumping upwards. When it hits its apex, the gravity slows to almost a complete halt so that he gets a little bit of a float at the top, and then I get heavy gravity at that point, causing him to fall to the ground quickly so it feels like he's got weight as he hits the ground. I've got a similar component for combat, I've got one for stats. This one keeps track of any changes to my stats when I equip a new piece of gear or drink a coffee. Alright, so let's talk about animations for a second. I have a love-hate relationship with animating. It's one of my biggest deficit areas as a creator, but it's also the area where I've learned and grown the most. Additionally, I really love how good animation improves the feel of the game, but I can't say I feel the same love for the repetitiveness of drawing and redrawing like 100 poses for my player. I'll talk a little more about making the animations when I get to combat. For now, I'll just show how it all works in-game. I have a pretty simple system for animation that generally works the same for each state. When I enter the move state, for example, it turns on the move animation. Same idea for other states like ledge climbing or grabbing a wall. There are some notable exceptions though. For example, I can't just use one animation for jumping because Willard needs to adapt to what the player's doing. So if you tap the button quickly, he does a short jump and needs to play his apex and falling animation sooner. So for this one, I set up a substate, with each frame of the jump animation having its own state, and then we move through these states depending on the player's vertical velocity. So if it's just a quick, short jump, he goes through these states very quickly. But if the player holds the jump button, he'll hang out in his apex jump state for a lot longer period of time. I also set up a slightly different series of jump states for when he's standing versus running. At this point, I was tired of playing with animations, state machines, and finicky raycasts, and I was equally tired of looking at this boring map. So I decided to add some upgrades. I put in a recolored tile set to look like a dirt/grass floor, and added a tree. The tree is just a stump with leaves that are separate objects. That way I can animate the leaves to move in the wind, or to get trimmed off later when the trees become harvestable. Now next up, I wanted to add in a background, and heads up, I still have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to art, but I've got some ideas. So I traced and filled an outline, kind of gave it this fuzzy edge, and then offset it so there were some peaks and valleys. Then just did a little copy paste, and then I went through and cleaned up the edges between all those layers so that it looked sort of like a tree in the background. From here I just made the outline of a single tree, which I could then copy paste multiple times to make it look like there's trees popping up in the distance. From here I just layered this a couple times, adding a sort of white sheet in between to make it look like some are further away than others, and then just offset them a bit to get the feel that there's trees receding into the distance. When I got into Unity, I just plopped in these layers, pulled each one into place, and again added a white sheet in between each one in order to give it that kind of foggy distance look. Now already you can see that that's starting to look a lot better in game. But I wanted to add a little bit of a parallax effect, so I just gave each of these layers a little bit of a value on the Z axis. You can see here when I tilt my camera that now some are closer and some are further away. And since I have a perspective camera, it actually makes them go at different speeds when I run, though here I definitely got my values backwards. So I just did a little tweak, kind of fixing those values so that the right objects would move faster, and you can see now when I'm moving that it's a much gentler bit of movement but gives the illusion of distance. Next, I just added in this fog here and hooked it up to my breeze script that I had in my last copy of the game. Now when I get in the game, I can toggle the speed that it moves, and it kind of just gives this eerie, kind of haunted forest sort of a look. When I change the sky to blue and take off the fog effect, I get this nice sunny sky in here. I just added some light rays and put them on an overlay as well. Now there's a few more things I'd love to show you that I've added since the reboot, but this video is getting long already, so I'll save those for later. Next time, I'll show you how I've been programming my enemies, improving my animation skills, as well as how I'm approaching inventories, gear, and combat. I hope to see you in that next video. Until then, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.